Eric Almirola is still undecided on his future for 2024, and Shane Van Gisbergen has officially confirmed his intentions to run full-time in NASCAR in 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead by starting talking about Supercars. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Saturday morning, the Supercars will sponsor Brody Keselowski at the Indy Road Course, with Superview streaming service being on the side of the car. Obviously, Supercar star Brody Keselowski will make his NASCAR Cup Series debut at the Indy Road Course in the number 33 car for Richard Childress Racing. I think Brody Keselowski's got a really good chance and a really good shot to win, and this is a really awesome and a great opportunity. Nonetheless, glad to see the Supercars is going to sponsor him for the event at the Indy Road Course. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson. As Jimmie Johnson has finally spoken out and has thanked everyone for the support over the last 2 weeks. Obviously, a few weeks ago, there was a really tragic situation that I'm not going to get into. It's really good to see that Jimmie Johnson is thanking the fans for the support and everything. We're still thinking about Jimmie Johnson and the Johnson family during a really tragic and sad time. We're thinking about Jimmie, and we're currently thinking about him at this particular moment. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ninja. As Ninja put out a tweet yesterday talking about NASCAR, calling NASCAR the battle royale of sports. That is really interesting to think about. I mean, Ninja isn't completely wrong in my opinion, and it's really cool to see Ninja, who's one of the biggest Twitch personalities, one of the biggest streamers ever in the history of Twitch, being able to talk about NASCAR. I think it's really cool. I think it's really exciting. Maybe Ninja will watch more races. Granted, I don't think the races that exciting yesterday. Maybe he needs to watch a race at Bristol to get a little more excited. Nonetheless, so I will say it's cool to see that Ninja talked about NASCAR. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. As with Corey Heim doing really good in the truck race at Richmond, he's officially your 2023 Craftsman Truck Series regular season champion. And that is despite missing a NASCAR Truck Series race at Gateway. It just shows how good Corey Heim has been in 2023, already scoring 2 wins and being extremely consistent this year. I have no doubt right now that he is the current favorite to win the 2023 Truck Series Championship. And if I'm not mistaken, if he is to win the Truck Series Championship in 2023, he would be the first driver that has won a championship that has missed a race, I believe, since Kyle Busch in the Cup Series in 2015. I think this would be the first time that a truck champion has been able to do that. But nonetheless, massive congratulations to Corey Heim on winning the regular season finale, winning the championship for the regular season. He deserves it. He's been great this year and has earned the right to win that championship, at least the regular season title. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Belgian Grand Prix. Now, of course, before the NASCAR Cup Series race at Richmond, you had the Belgian Grand Prix. And once again, Max Verstappen picked up his 8th consecutive victory. Now, Max Verstappen did have to work a lot harder. He didn't get it instantly. He had to start in 6th position. He was the fastest car, but he had a 5-position grid penalty, I believe, for an engine change. They had to make an engine change earlier in the week. Had to start in 6th place, but he drove up there and was able to pass Sergio Perez on lap 17 to take the lead and would pull out to almost a 20-second lead. Now, there had been an incident early in the race between Oscar Piastri and Carlos Sainz, but that was pretty much the only incident that happened in the race. Both cars did end up retiring from the race. And then Max Verstappen, like I said, went on to take a pretty dominant victory by over 23 seconds. I believe the last 2 races combined, Verstappen has won by 56 seconds. It just shows how great of a driver Max Verstappen has been. And I think Max Verstappen is going to lock championship up very early. Nonetheless, huge congratulations to Max Verstappen on picking up another victory in Formula 1. A well-deserved win, and congratulations to him on picking up another victory. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. Now, obviously, over the last week, Joey Logano has been pretty viral on social media due to his radio communication and what he said on his inboard camera at Pocono. Now, Joey Logano spoke to the media, and Davey Siegel had reported on this on Twitter, and Joey Logano says he didn't realize anyone could hear him. But he says he had every right to be frustrated and was frustrated because he has had this happen 4 times where he had basically all flat tires. And the reason he's frustrated is because he wants to get everything done and get back to pit road very quickly. He said to the media earlier in the week that he knew that there was no way he's going to get back in the race anyways with the amount of damage he had on the car. But he wanted basically, was a little frustrated because he wanted to get back a lot quicker and a lot faster. And they weren't completely listening. I guess it was really loud. And now they probably hear him. And he hasn't had any communication situation with the people from Pocono. Wonder if they work in your track. We don't know. But nonetheless, I think Joe Logano had every right to be frustrated with the situation because they were kind of standing around. But it definitely was really, really funny communication here. Joe Logano get upset. I mean, Bubba Wallace, he made a parody of it, like a go-karting video. And I think that was a really, really funny parody that he had done. But in my opinion, I don't think Joe Logano is wrong for being frustrated and upset with the situation. I think he wanted to get back to the road a lot quicker, and I can't blame him for being upset. It was definitely funny to hear him get mad, don't get me wrong, but at the same token, same time, I think it's really cool nonetheless. See, Logano knows it's funny. He understands the frustration, and NASCAR is working with them to make a solution, to come with a solution when it comes to that situation. Hopefully they can figure out a solution with the flat tires. Maybe they have interliners in the future. Who knows? Maybe they can find a way to bring the tow truck out where they have tough spare tires on, so it doesn't take as long and Logano can just get back to pit road. So we'll see what happens going forward, but it's interesting to hear Joe Logano be upset and frustrated about that situation. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brad Keselowski. Now, Brad Keselowski, of course, is a co-owner of RFK Racing, and RFK Racing picked up their first victory of 2023 when Chris Buescher scored his third career Cup Series victory and his first win of 2023. Brad Keselowski did end up finishing, I believe, in 5th or 6th position, had a really strong car, might have been the guy winning the race instead of Chris Buescher if he didn't make a mistake on pit road. But Brad Keselowski was speaking to media about the racing, and he actually says that he liked the style of racing that we saw at Richmond. He liked the long green flag runs and said it does reward elite talent. I won't disagree with Brad Keselowski to an extent. I will say Keselowski's not completely wrong. I thought the race yesterday was decent. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It was just meh. You did have passing throughout the field, and you did have to manage your tires throughout the day. There were cars that were good on the long run, and there were cars that were definitely good on the short run. Guys like Ryan Preece and Eric Almirola were really good on the long run, and guys like Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick are really good on the short run. And it just seemed like that RFK had the package set correctly, where they're good on the short run, but also really, really good on the long run as well. But I will say sometimes you're going to have races that are not the most exciting, and there's nothing wrong with that where you have races that are not the most exciting overall. But I don't want to see every single race like this. I want to see some races that are exciting. But again, when you have a race like this, it just makes those races like Kansas. It makes races like Charlotte for the Coke 600 and races like Atlanta earlier this year makes them feel a lot more special and much more memorable than this race. But it wasn't a bad race. It was just a decent race, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you got to have races that are kind of not as exciting to get races that are legendary and awesome. But again, I think it also, what we saw yesterday, rewards elite talent, and it shows that Chris Buescher and RFK have really brought a great package, and it shows that they are elite talent as a team. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sage Karam. Now, Sage Karam has spoken to media after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Road America, and he's hoping with his really strong run at Road America that he's hoping to go to NASCAR full-time in the future. Now, Sage Karam has made a lot of NASCAR starts in 2023, and a couple days ago at Road America, he had a career day. He was up front competing for the victory, was up there up front, had a really strong day, ran top 5 with Sam Hunt Racing, at great pace and great speed, and at one point was leading with 2 laps to go, but made a mistake and drove through the grass, but still ended up crossing the line in 4th place. I think Sage Karam had one of his most impressive runs in his racing career. Not only did it probably his best run in NASCAR for sure, but this might have been his best run overall in any form of racing that he's ever competed in, except Indy Lights, where I think he won a championship there, I think in 2015 or 2014. But Sage Karam, I would love to see him go full-time in NASCAR with a team like Sam Hunt Racing. I think he's a really talented driver. I know he can wreck a lot of equipment, and he's destroyed a lot of equipment throughout his career. But I think Sage Karam does have a lot of talent and can be very competitive if you give him a shot and opportunity to go full-time. The question now will be, will he get an opportunity to go full-time? I think it all comes down to sponsorship and funding. I don't know how much chance has currently because this race he had at Road America was the only race he had planned to run with Sam Hunt Racing this year. Maybe he gets more opportunities to run with Sam Hunt Racing in the future. Maybe, just maybe, he gets to run that second 24 car full-time in 2024 because that car doesn't really have a set driver. No Connor Mosack has ran quite a few races, but let's be honest, Sage Karam has done more in one race with that team, and Tyler Reddick done more with that team in 2 races than what Connor Mosack's done. I'm not a big fan of Connor Mosack, as you probably can tell. I'd like to see Sage Karam go full-time with that team instead of Connor Mosack in 2024. I think he deserves a chance. I think he deserves an opportunity to go full-time, and maybe, just maybe, we're going to see Sage Karam have an opportunity to go full-time in NASCAR in 2024. We'll see what happens, but hopefully he'll get an opportunity shot to run full-time in NASCAR. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Johnny Benson. As it was announced on Saturday evening that Johnny Benson is going to run at the Asterix race in the upcoming event at Berlin Raceway this Thursday. This is an amazing and great opportunity for Johnny Benson. Now, Johnny Benson has worked with the Asterix before. He worked with them as a pace car driver in the first season. And I've been saying I want to see Johnny Benson have a chance and opportunity to race in the Asterix. We'll get a little bit why he's getting the opportunity to run in the Asterix in the first place. But this is an amazing and a great opportunity for Johnny Benson. I think Johnny Benson is going to have a really good chance and opportunity to win because I think he has actually quite a bit of experience at Berlin Raceway from back in the day. And he's also local because Johnny Benson, I believe, is from Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. So he's kind of a local person from the area. So this might kind of bring in the local star back, even though Johnny Benson, of course, is a NASCAR Truck Series champion and also is a winner of the NASCAR Cup Series in 2002 at Rockingham. He's an elite driver. He's got elite craft. Won a lot of races in his time, and now he gets an awesome chance and a great opportunity to run the Asterix. I think he's going to do a really awesome and a great job with the team and great job with the Asterix, and looking forward to seeing him run in the Asterix at Berlin. I think it's going to be exciting, and I think he'll do a really good job in the event. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Dean Thompson versus Hailie Deegan. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race on FS1 at Richmond, you saw what happened between Hailie Deegan and Dean Thompson. So, I think it was about halfway through the Truck Series race, there apparently had been some contact between Dean Thompson and Hailie Deegan. Now, obviously, FS1 did not do a good job covering the race. They thought maybe that Dean Thompson made a mistake and Deegan was right behind her, basically behind him. But basically, it looked to me like there had been a little bit of contact. And after the race, Dean Thompson had gone up and talked to Hailie Deegan. Now, do not get me wrong. Hailie Deegan probably had one of her better truck races of the 2023 season. She had ran top 15 and top 20 pretty much all night long, had really good speeds, and she was clearly faster than Dean Thompson in this race. Dean Thompson had been struggling. But it sounds like she had gotten into Dean Thompson in the race. It seems like her best races, when she runs really good and she's having good races, she seems to get involved in controversy. But I think it still was one of her most impressive races of her Truck Series career up to this point. Despite the fact she didn't get as good of a finish, she had top 10 speed throughout the night and was running really, really good, which shows some growth and improvement. Dean Thompson, meanwhile, I think he's still also got talent. I know he's had some good performances, had a really strong run at Charlotte, and was running really good at Texas before having that really, really unfortunate and scary accident where he actually, I think, ended up missing a race because of it. But when it comes to Hailie Deegan, I think she's got talent, but she can't be making mistakes on the racetrack when she does end up getting into people. Again, she was having a fantastic race and a really, really strong run, and she made a mistake on the racetrack. And if you're going to be someone who's going to be racing in the Xfinity Series next year, because there is some talk and conversation that she could move up to Xfinity in 2024, though it's not officially confirmed at this point, I will say when it comes to her, she can't make mistakes. If she can just put her car and focus on running really, really good and not make mistakes on the racetrack, she is going to be someone that has potential. But I've said this for a long time. She does deserve a chance and an opportunity to run full-time in Xfinity, maybe see if she can do better there, because I think some drivers run better in respective series than others. But I will say it was good to see her have a solid run in the truck race, but it sucks that she did have to get into a little bit of controversy to have that come into play, where she did get into Dean Thompson, which caused a little controversy, where she did technically almost end up getting in the lead lap because of it. I'm glad to see, though, that she did have a good run, but it sucks that she did get into some controversy that caused a little bit of that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the short track package test. While you're probably watching this video, currently at this moment, there is a short track package test that is taking place at Richmond. Now, this test was supposed to take place a couple weeks earlier after the Cup Series race at New Hampshire, but it got postponed due to the weather and due to rain. So what is this test? Well, it's a fixed short track package. It's obviously no secret that the short track racing, since the next gen has come around, has produced not the greatest racing in the world. I think the Richmond has been a decent track for the racing overall, but I think tracks like North Wilkesboro, I think Martinsville and Bristol, in my opinion, have suffered because of the next-gen car. One of the things they're currently doing is they're testing a lift splitter. And the hope is, in the front of it, and according, I think, as Eric Jacuzzi had said this to the media earlier this week, that is supposed to bring 100 pounds of downforce on the back and front of the car, creating more downforce on the front, creating, hopefully, an opportunity to make a run to the inside and make passing more prevalent. Now, I think one thing that could be a really good solution, and while I think this is definitely a really good solution, hopefully for the next-gen cars, that's what I think we're hoping, is if it is true 100 pounds of downforce is going on the front of these cars, cars that should hopefully create a better opportunity to pass, and you're not going to have to get stuck behind a dirty air, because one of the issues with the next-gen car has been the dirty air. They have made changes. They had a smaller splitter, a smaller spoiler as well to hopefully create racing. I will say has improved a little bit of the short track racing, but again, I think the short track racing, which I think a lot of people thought was going to be the best racing with the next-gen car, I think it has been maybe the worst in my opinion. I think the next-gen car, its ambitions and goals, initially we've seen intermediate racing be great. I think the road course racing has gotten better in 2023, but I will say when it comes to the short track racing, it's not been as good. So like I said, what the hope is with the short track package test is to make the cars definitely a lot better on the short tracks. Granted, I think that it hopefully will fix it. I think one thing that really could fix this issue is get more horsepower back in the car. And in my personal take, let's get some more horsepower back in these cars, because I think that would definitely help with a lot of the issues and fix some of the problems. But I think if this can fix the issues, I think it'll be better for everybody. So we'll see what happens. But again, there's a test currently going on as we speak right now. We'll see what happens with the test overall. We'll probably be covering the test on Wednesday as well with everything we find out. Hopefully the drivers have positive feedback about it. I know they had positive feedback after Phoenix, and they weren't it's not been as good of racing at the tracks, but in my opinion, hopefully they can fix this issue and get this issue resolved for short track racing so we can get better, so we get more short tracks on the circuit. Obviously, Auto Club is still being converted to short track, and we still don't know when that's going to get done at this point, but we know that we want better short track racing, and hopefully, maybe, just maybe, we can fix the short track racing in NASCAR. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Andretti Autosport and then potentially going to NASCAR. Now, Nathan Brown from the IndyStar put out an article earlier today in regards to Andretti Autosport. And Nathan Brown had asked Michael Andretti, who is the owner and co-owner of Andretti Autosport, and he asked, what is the goal for Andretti Autosport to potentially go to NASCAR? What would it look like for them to go to NASCAR? Because there's obviously been a lot of talk and conversation over the last few weeks that Andretti Autosport has been considering going to NASCAR in 2024 or 2025. But Michael Andretti does point to his deal with Wayne Taylor Racing, where Andretti Autosport is currently working with Wayne Taylor Racing in IMSA, and also I think they're working them a little bit in other forms as well, where they basically they're completely hands off with the operations, or letting Wayne Taylor Racing basically run the operations completely. But Wayne Taylor Racing is eventually going to be moving into the Andretti campus they're currently building for 2025. Now, Michael Andretti does say that basically they still have a lot of ambitions to go to Formula One for 2025, and they're hoping to have a deal hopefully soon, done really, really soon. Mohammed bin Suleiman wants to bring Andretti Autosport definitely to Formula One, but obviously a lot of the teams are budging, and they do not want them in currently at the moment. But I think NASCAR definitely would be a safer route for Andretti to get in. Obviously, Andretti has attempted to come to NASCAR. Remember back in 2013 or 2012, they actually had announced that they were going to go to NASCAR. They were going to have Kurt Busch and maybe Matt Kenseth driving for the team in 2013. That's one of the reasons why Kurt Busch didn't end up driving for them in the 2014 Indy 500, because initially they still got the chance to run it because of the situation there. That being said, I think the biggest way they're going to get into NASCAR, if they were to come to NASCAR, I think is to partner up with Spire Motorsports. Obviously, Spire's had a lot of big changes, and one of the reasons why a lot of people point to Spire Motorsports as a potential possibility for this happening is because of the partnership with Gamebridge. If I'm not mistaken, Dan Townis, I think, is a part owner now of Andretti Autosport, and Gamebridge has a big partnership now with Spire Motorsports, sponsoring for a ton of races over the next couple of years. And it sounds like there's some big changes that could be coming to Spire Motorsports for 2024. There's a lot of rumors that Carson Motorsport might be taking over the 77 car next year, and there's also expected that Corey LaJoie will sign a multi-year contract extension with Spire Motorsports for 2024, maybe 2025 and 2026 as well. Nonetheless, I think Andretti Autosport does have a really good chance and a great opportunity to go full-time next year, maybe in the future. We'll see what happens, though, and hopefully Andretti does get an opportunity and a chance to run in NASCAR in the 2024 season. And I think if that happens, they will partner up with Spire Motorsports and will probably give them a lot of funding and a lot of money as well for that team. Hopefully that does end up happening, but we'll see what happens in the foreseeable future. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Paul Tracy. Now, we already talked about Johnny Benson running at Berlin. The big reason why Johnny Benson is running at Berlin is because Paul Tracy has been indefinitely suspended by the SRX. Now, why did Paul Tracy get suspended? Well, it was due to what he did on the racetrack and his antics on the racetrack as well, and not taking responsibility for that. And also it's because Ken Schrader was threatening to quit the Asterix after what happened this past weekend at Motor Mile. With about 20 laps to go in this race, Paul Tracy made a really bonehead and a really stupid move. He comes up the racetrack, tends to clear himself. Josie Newgarden is not going to back off. He's clearly there, and Paul Tracy clears himself and causes a 3 to 4 car pile up. Now, the drivers in the driver meeting have been warned that if you're going to drive aggressive, there was a chance they might end up suspending. They wanted drivers to be a lot more clean, a lot more respectful. Paul Tracy, it is no secret, has raced kind of like an idiot and kind of like a hack on the racetrack. And that's what he's known to be, is kind of a hack. Don't get me wrong, Paul Tracy has an illustrious career in IndyCar, where he's won 31 races in IndyCar and also is a champion in 2003. Here's the problem, though, with Paul Tracy. Paul Tracy is basically way in over his head, and I think this suspension was definitely justified. The fact that he got suspended from the Fun Series is kind of funny and definitely interesting, but after causing a massive pileup, I think it had to be done, because that shows he's definitely screwed up if you're getting suspended indefinitely. And I said this, but I don't want him ever seen back in the Asterix. If you pull those antics on the racetrack that he pulled, you definitely are justified to get a suspension. I think he earned a right to get a suspension for what he did, and I'm glad he's gotten suspended from the Asterix. I think it's going to clean the Asterix up. You're going to have a lot more clean drivers, and also Ken Schrader gets to stay in the Asterix. I know sometimes you can turn somebody. I know he's wrecked people from time to time, but what he did at Motor Mile was completely unacceptable and completely unforgivable. You have a limited number of cars in the Asterix. I know they've increased their inventory, but you can't keep wrecking cars and destroying cars every single week and tearing them up. And Tracy's done that a lot, and it just seemed like he didn't care. And I think getting rid of him and suspending him indefinitely, probably in general just kicking him out from the Asterix, I think this is a really justified, a really good move. Maybe Jerry Mayfield, he gets a shot, an opportunity in the future to run in place of him, but overall, in my opinion, I'm glad to see that he got suspended, because I think it's justified and it's completely deserved that he got suspended from the Asterix, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Pocono Move. Now, obviously, one of the biggest controversies that's been going around is what happened at Pocono Raceway. And a lot of drivers are asked about the move that Denny Hamlin made on Kyle Larson, where Denny Hamlin forced Kyle Larson up into the outside wall. There was a little contact between both drivers, and Kyle Larson did end up hitting the outside wall. Now, a lot of drivers are asked about the move itself and asked what they would do in that situation. Kevin Harvick says, you know my answer. I haven't had to answer that at this point, but you would know my answer if I got into that. Chase Lays doesn't know, and he's not surprised by the move that Denny Hamlin ended up making. William Byron says, it's becoming very common at this point with the move, that kind of move we saw at Pocono, and basically there's no repercussions from NASCAR in regards to that. Mark Truex Jr. also, he had a very interesting answer in the situation. He says he wouldn't make that move. But obviously, Mark Truex Jr., he would not make that move because he's the cleanest driver on the racetrack, and he's a very respectful driver on the racetrack. Now, here's my take and opinion on the move that happened at Pocono. I understand that Denny Hamlin's got to do everything he's got to do to win the race, but I'm with Mark Truex Jr. at this point. I would not make that move. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you didn't have a problem with the move that Denny Hamlin did to Ross Chastain. It's a very similar move that Denny Hamlin did to Ross Chastain that he did to Kyle Larson. And yes, the reason I don't think anybody had a problem with what Denny Hamlin did to Ross Chastain is because Ross Chastain kind of deserved it. Kyle Larson did not deserve what he got handed at Pocono. I think it was a bad move, and I know Denny Hamlin says that he didn't touch him, but in my opinion, he did touch him. There's clear contact right there. Everyone knows there was contact, and Denny Hamlin, even if it was very light, there was clear contact. Again, I think it's becoming more and more common. I think there is something with the next-gen car that you do get side-by-side. There is an aero push, but in my opinion, Denny Hamlin's definitely at fault. I know Denny Hamlin's not, of course, going to take responsibility for the incident and the situation, but in my opinion, I think it's no secret Denny Hamlin's at fault, and a lot of drivers, I think they'd probably make the move if they were in the same position, but I would personally wouldn't make the move if I was in that same situation. But that's just my opinion, but I would not make that move if I was in that situation. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch was speaking to the media on Saturday morning before NASCAR Cup Series cars got on the racetrack at Richmond, and Kyle Busch calls out Paul Tracy, but also at the same time calls out Denny Hamlin in the same instant. He says he must have learned from Denny Hamlin in the week before. a pretty big jab at Denny Hamlin and a pretty big jab at Paul Tracy. Now, we just talked about this on the channel. On Friday, Paul Tracy got suspended, and basically Paul Tracy did something very similar, actually, to Denny Hamlin, where he kind of ended up walling Joseph Newgarden and put him outside wall and causing a pretty big wreck. Now, the difference between what Denny Hamlin did is that Denny Hamlin didn't cause a big wreck. Kyle Larson continued going on, even though Kyle Larson was very unhappy and very upset. But Kyle Busch is someone who's called out a lot of drivers in the recent years. He's called about the etiquette of racing. We talked about, I think, on Monday or Tuesday earlier in the week. We talked about the fact that basically Kyle Busch said that the etiquette has changed in the sport. But it's interesting to hear Kyle Busch call out his team, basically his former teammate. Because remember, Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin have actually had a little bit of beef and a little bit of history from back in the early 2010s. In 2010 at the All-Stars, I think Denny Hamlin actually did a kind of a similar move where he put Kyle Busch in the outside wall, and Kyle Busch was not happy with Denny Hamlin after that. He basically told him to keep me away from him because Kyle Busch was probably going to go kick Denny Hamlin's ass after that situation ended up happening. But in my opinion, when it comes to this, I don't completely disagree with Kyle Busch. He's not wrong. I think it's also kind of funny that because he's known to have some really, really interesting and funny quotes. He kind of talked about racing costs as well. But when it comes to this situation, I think Kyle Busch is definitely right. I think Paul Tracy was a really, really big aggressive. It was over at the top with his aggression and was a hacky move that Paul Tracy did end up making on the racetrack. But again, I just find it really funny and really interesting to see Kyle Busch basically call Paul Tracy and call the move similar to basically call it similar move to Denny Hamlin. I think it's funny. I think it's interesting. And nonetheless, it's kind of interesting to see Kyle Busch call Paul Tracy. And to that extent, very interesting to see Kyle Busch call out Paul Tracy and also a former team of his, that being Denny Hamlin. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. Now, there's been a lot of questions about Martin Truex Jr.'s future past 2023 because Martin Truex Jr. has not announced yet if he's going to be racing in 2024 or if he's going to be retiring at the end of 2023. Well, Martin Truex Jr. has finally made a decision on something else, though, and that is that he has officially purchased a boat. But he's still undecided on his future for 2024. Now, obviously, a lot of people are talking about this boat because a few weeks ago at New Hampshire, Martin Truex Jr., after winning the race at New Hampshire, kind of stated that he wants to get a boat. Basically, once he does retire from NASCAR, which we don't know when that is going to happen, but once he does retire, he wants to go fishing a lot after and go spend some time out on the lake. Now, I think purchase boat does help with the future conversation. I still think, though, when it comes to Martin Truex Jr., I think it's still a little more 50-50, probably 60-40. I still think Martin Truex Jr. does have a really good chance and a really good shot to return in 2024, but also could retire at the end of 2023. I think, though, because Martin Truex Jr. has been extremely competitive in the 2023 season, I think he will return in 2024. But the decision is going to have to come very, very soon. We're in late July and about to enter August, and he still has not made a decision. Remember, in 2022, Martin Truex Jr. had already made the decision by this point to come back for 2023. But remember, 2022, he was struggling. This year, Martin Truex Jr. has an absolute great chance and possibility to win his second NASCAR Cup Series championship. He's been extremely competitive. He's been extremely fast this year. Already has scored 3 wins, technically 4 if you count the All-Star race, and has a really good chance and opportunity to win his second NASCAR Cup Series championship. But if Martin Truex Jr. does end up retiring at the end of 2023, who will take the 19 car? Well, a lot of people do believe at this point that John Hunter Nemechek is the favorite to take over the 19 car if Martin Truex Jr. does end up retiring. Because John Hunter Nemechek has been having a really good year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I know the last 2 weeks have not gone well for him, but he has won 4 races this year, and to a lot of people, he is a current favorite to win the championship. Joe Gibbs Racing is really strong on the short tracks in the NASCAR Xfinity Series here. Go back to Phoenix where Sammy Smith won. That is a Joe Gibbs Racing driver, and a lot of people are looking at John Hunter Nemechek and is being groomed to be the potential replacement for Martin Truex Jr. at the end of the year if he does retire. But I still think at this point, when it comes to Martin Truex Jr., I think he is going to return in 2024. I think the fact he's getting that boat to be prepared. But I think next year is going to be the last year for Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. basically will be 44 at the end of 2024. And technically, he will basically be the second or third oldest NASCAR Cup Series driver. He's the same age as Denny Hamlin and also is a little bit younger than Kevin Hart. But they're both going to be the oldest full-time NASCAR Cup Series drivers at the start of 2024. That'd be Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin. But I think at this point, MTJ does come back. But I think next year is going to be Martin Truex Jr.'s final year in the NASCAR Cup Series, and I think he will come back for 2024. But like I said, I think 2024 is going to absolutely be the final year for Martin Truex Jr. We'll wait to see how happens in regards to his future for 2024. But at this point, I think 2024 is going to be the last year for Martin Truex Jr. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson versus Denny Hamlin once again. Now, we've talked about Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin on the channel quite a bit over the last week, and it's because of what happened at Pocono. Now, they actually both ended up speaking to media over the weekend. There was a little bit of controversy between both of them once again this past weekend at Richmond. So, Kyle Larson spoke to the media on Saturday, and he said that he actually had texted Denny Hamlin, and they haven't met face-to-face at this current moment. And the reason Kyle Larson believes they didn't meet face-to-face is because he says he would have gotten really, really more and more frustrated. And he says this situation at Pocono has lingered on a lot longer than what ended up happening in other situations. Kyle Larson says usually he doesn't let things linger on and generally lets everything move on from time to time. But he said because of this situation where Denny Hamlin, after watching Action Detrimental, he said he let it linger on a little bit more because Denny Hamlin did not admit that there was contact. But Kyle Larson says there was contact, and if you've watched the replays from what happened at Pocono, you could clearly tell. But this past weekend in Richmond, we saw both of them next to each other or right close to each other. And Kyle Larson actually got some contact on Denny Hamlin and forced Denny Hamlin up the racetrack, getting maybe potentially the only retaliation that he's going to end up needing, which is something that you normally do not see from Kyle Larson is retaliation. Now, Kyle Larson obviously did not wreck him. He just moved Denny Hamlin up the racetrack. If that's Kyle Larson's retaliation, I think that's absolutely fair game because Kyle Larson, he got completely moved, and this might have cost Denny Hamlin a lot of time to catch Chris Buescher. Maybe if Denny Hamlin doesn't get moved up the racetrack and lose a lot of time, he might be up there contending for the victory and instead losing more time on the racetrack. But Denny Hamlin, we were wondering if Denny Hamlin was going to be mad and frustrated Kyle Larson for the incident. Denny Hamlin sped to Bob Pockers. No problem with the move. He said that Kyle Larson basically was frustrated, was having a really, really bad day. So Denny Hamlin had no big issues with what Kyle Larson did. And that was what I was kind of hoping for Denny Hamlin. I was hoping Denny Hamlin was not going to be a hypocrite in that situation, and he was going to accept it. It seems like Denny Hamlin has accepted that situation, knows that he's going to be raced differently by Kyle Larson. Again, we all go back to the Pocono move, and I maybe think that what Denny Hamlin did was completely wrong. Don't get me wrong, you're going for the race win, but you force Kyle Larson up into the outside wall. So in my opinion, the move that Kyle Larson made at Richmond to get back at Denny Hamlin was absolutely justified and absolutely bad. Now, Kyle Larson already had some other issues with his teammate Alex Bowman in the race. There was some contact between both drivers earlier in the day as well. So that's not completely shocking and surprising. Both drivers were having issues throughout the day. Hendrick Motorsports was completely off their game at Richmond, which was very, very surprising. Chase Elliott was the best finisher from that team and the best former by the team as well. And I think Kyle Larson finally said, you know what, I'm going to get my retaliation against Denny Hamlin. And I think to me, it was justified and completely right that Kyle Larson got back at Denny Hamlin. Will we see both these drivers have their friendship effective? I don't think it's going to be effective long term, in my opinion. But when it comes to situation between both of these drivers, I think when it comes especially to Denny Hamlin better not complain on his podcast, because if he does, I think he's a complete hypocrite. But from what he said to Bob Pockers, I don't think he's complaining. I don't think he has really any issue and major problem with what Kyle Larson did. And I think it's interesting nonetheless to hear that you see both these drivers had some really interesting and more spicy comments we might talk about later this week. Obviously, Kyle Larson more frustrated about the situation. He feels like he got messed up. And I think Kyle Larson, is good to see him speaking to media. And I think it's nothing wrong with him speaking to media about the situation. And now he's just got to focus on the future, trying to win more races and trying to win a championship and hopefully getting more wins this year in 2023 and winning more races and trying to win his second NASCAR Cup Series championship. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. Now, we've talked about Aric Almirola quite a bit on this channel over the last couple of weeks. And the reason we're talking about Aric Almirola a lot on this channel is because he is still currently undecided on his future past 2023. Now remember, Aric Almirola was actually supposed to retire at the end of the 2022 season, but it was decided in late August, early September that he would come back for 2023. Now remember, he had initially signed a multi-year contract extension with Stewart-Haas Racing. However, he is still undecided on his future for 2024. As he went on Sirius XM NASCAR radio on basically, I believe it was on Friday morning, Friday morning, and then later in the week speaking to media, he's still undecided on his future. But according to articles from Racer and Sirius XM NASCAR radio, he needs to let Stewart-Haas Racing know in the next month or two. So within the next 30 to 60 days, we should know about Aric Almirola's future in the NASCAR Cup Series. Now, a lot of people in the industry do believe that Aric Almirola is going to retire from the NASCAR Cup Series at the end of this season. Look, he had a really good run this past weekend in Richmond. Stewart-Haas Racing looked really, really strong and really, really good this past weekend. But he has struggled this year in 2023. I believe Aric Almirola is either 27th or 28th in the points currently at this moment and has only scored 2 top 10s at this point. I believe last year at this time, Aric Almirola had 5 or 6 top 10 finishes and was a lot more competitive and still had a chance to make it in on points at this point in 2022. Aric Almirola is having probably a low in his NASCAR Cup Series career and has been struggling. And I think one of the reasons why he did come back this year is because I think Smithfield convinced him. Because I think, like I said, we all thought that he was going to retire at the end of 2022 and not come back in 2023. But it was officially confirmed that he was going to be coming back for 2023. But I think he has struggled. I think at this point, though, there's a really good chance and really good possibility that he is going to retire at the end of 2023. So now the big question revolves around who is going to take the 10 car in 2024. Shall Michael McDowell Aric Almirola retire? Let's first talk about the main candidate that is the lead candidates. The first driver who's the lead candidate is Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell's name has been brought up a lot in conversations as right now being the lead candidate to take over the 10 car in 2024. Michael McDowell is an extremely talented driver. He is having a career year in the NASCAR Cup Series. I know he's not won a race this year, but he's legitimately in the playoffs on points alone, currently 18 points above the cutoff line. He didn't have a great race at Richmond, but a lot of drivers below the playoffs, except Ty Gibbs, really struggled throughout the day. And Michael McDowell has done a very good job with Firm Motorsports in 2023. And that's what a crew chief that I didn't think was really going to help Michael McDowell this year. A lot of people in the industry do believe that if Michael McDowell got a better chance and a better opportunity and a better car, they do believe that Michael McDowell would have a chance to be a championship threat, and not a championship threat, but be a great competitor. Here's the issue for Michael McDowell, though. Michael McDowell does say that basically he really doesn't get to decide his future. But Firmer Motorsports right now, I think, is better than Stewart-Haas Racing. Outside of Kevin Harvick, the team has struggled this year in 2023. And even at times, Kevin Harvick has struggled. With Kevin Harvick leaving at the end of the year, that's something I worry about when it comes to the 10 car. Now, I will say when it comes to the 10 car, if Michael McDowell does take the 10 car in 2024, I do believe that Michael McDowell will be someone who can do a little better than Aric Almirola. But it won't be much better because I don't think Stewart-Haas Racing is up to par and up to snuff. Another driver that is another potential lead candidate is Zane Smith. Zane Smith is a very underrated driver. Well, he's a championship threat in the Truck Series and has been solid in his Select Cup Series starts with Firmer Motorsports. But here's the issue when it comes to Zane Smith. Zane Smith's under contract with Ford and Front Row through 2026. And Zane Smith is expected in the coming days to likely announce that he is going to be full-time in NASCAR for in the Cup Series for 2024, likely from Motorsports. I think he either goes to the 34 or 38. Zane Smith does have a chance, though, to go to Stewart-Haas Racing, but likely will be in a Front Row car in 2024. Then you also have Todd Gillen. Todd Gillen is not signed a contract for 2024 as well, and I think he deserves another really good opportunity. But I think really big question is sponsorship and funding. I don't know how much funding he has. I know he's part of KHI management, but his name's been brought up a lot in conversations. Then you have another driver like Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton earlier in the year had been rumored to potentially go to the 10 car because of Dex Imaging sponsorship, but it sounds like at this point that Harrison Burton is likely going to end up driving the number 21 car once again in 2024 because Dex is likely going to be committed once again to Wood Brothers in 2024. If you want my opinion at this point, though, when it comes to the 10 car, I think at this point that ride is going to end up going over to Michael McDowell in 2024. I think Aric Almirola is going to retire at the end of the 2023 season. I don't think he's having as much fun this year. I know he had a good run this past weekend at Richmond, but I think Aric Almirola is going to make a decision to retire at the end of 2023. And I think Michael McDowell, who I think has earned a right and opportunity to go to Stewart-Haas Racing, I think they're looking for a more veteran driver. And I think next year that you're going to see Zane Smith in the 34 car, and I think Todd Gillen will be driving the 38 car once again in 2024, pending sponsorship and funding. But I think Aragon Roll will be taking over, will be retiring, and I think Michael McDowell will be taking over the 10 car starting in 2024. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in regards to this silly season, but it sounds like right now that you're going to see Michael McDowell take over the 10 car, and you're going to see that 10 car go to Michael McDowell. Now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen, also known as SVG. Now, there's been a lot of talk and conversations over the last few weeks about SVG potentially joining NASCAR full-time in 2024. Well, Shane Van Gisbergen confirmed to the media in a VA sleuth in every media outlet in Australia for the VA Supercars that he will join NASCAR full-time in 2024. His intentions are to go full-time, that is, in 2024. I cannot tell you how excited and stoked I am to see Shane Van Gisbergen come to NASCAR full-time in 2024. And a lot of us think it's initially going to be going full-time cup racing in 2024. However, he says he would probably like to go into the lower rungs of NASCAR, maybe racing the Xfinity Series and racing in the Truck Series maybe in 2024, while maybe making some select NASCAR Cup Series starts in the 2024 season. Now, I think this is a really, really great opportunity for Shane Van Gisbergen. Obviously, Shane Van Gisbergen won in his NASCAR Cup Series debut, the first driver to do that since Johnny Rutherford in 1963 at Daytona. He was the first one to do that since then at the Chicago Street Course race. And ever since then, a lot of people have believed that Shane Van Gisbergen does serve a chance and an opportunity to run full-time in the Cup Series, though, in 2024. Now, I will say when it comes to Shane Van Gisbergen, I think if he is going to run the Xfinity and the Truck Series, though, in 2024, I think he is definitely playing it a lot safer because I think he'll be able to learn ovals much quicker. I think a lot of drivers do jump the Cup Series and they struggle initially. So for him to think and be smart about that and potentially run the Xfinity Series and Truck Series first before going full-time Cup racing in the future, I think that is really, really cool to see. So let's talk about some potential opportunities, though, for Shane Van Gisbergen. If he was to go full-time Cup racing, though, in 2024, where could he go? Well, let's start off by talking about some potential possibilities. You have Trackhouse Racing and a third Trackhouse car that could be available for 2024. Obviously, he's made a couple starts with Trackhouse Racing and Project 91 as well, making another start for that team at the Indy Road Course in about a week or two from now, and I think he's got a really good chance to win that event. Trackhouse would be a really great opportunity for him to go full-time. I know Trackhouse kind of struggled over the last few weeks. They've been kind of falling off, but I think he'd be very competitive with Trackhouse Racing, especially he ran part-time with them in 2024. Another team he could have a good opportunity and shot if he was to go Xfinity Series racing, but also go Cup racing, is Kaulig Racing. Kaulig Racing does not, it's really unclear what's going on with their Xfinity Series program for 2024 currently at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the 31 car and the Cup Series being potentially available for full-time basis in 2024, but also is talking 16 car could be available as well, as AJ Allmendinger has not set his future for that team for 2024. But also, you do have a possibility, like I said, of both those rides being available, and Austin Hill potentially also going Cup racing with that team in the 2024 season. But also, Kaulig Racing has that Xfinity Series program, and it's unclear what's going on with the 10 car, the 11 car, and the 16 car. I expect that the 16 car will likely be handed by Chandler Smith once again in 2024. Chandler Smith's had a really, really good season. But there's been a lot of talk and conversations about uncertainty around Daniel Hemrick's future in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He's kind of struggled with Kaulig Racing the last couple of years. I know Kaulig has not been a championship caliber team, as they were a few years ago when he decided to join the team in 2022. But Daniel Hemrick has kind of struggled, and that 10 car has been a car that's had full-time and drivers and a couple other drivers in that car. So maybe he goes to the 10 car full-time in Xfinity and maybe runs a third Kaulig car in the Cup Series in 2024. There's other opportunities that could be available. Junior Motorsports could be a potential possibility for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. We don't know what's going on with that team. It sounds like there's going to be some big shuffling going on. Carson Osbar could go to the 8 car next year in 2024, but could go to the 9 car. But you also have the 8 car that could be available for a driver like Shane Van Gisbergen, who I think could immediately be a championship threat and a championship contender in 2024. But if Junior Motorsports was to make the ambitions going Cup racing in 2024, 2025, maybe they choose SVG. But there's other teams that do have Xfinity Series programs as well. Look at a team like Stewart-Haas Racing. Stewart-Haas Racing, we talk about Eric Almirola likely retiring at the end of 2023 and giving ride to Michael McDowell. But you have another rider that could be able in the 41 car in 2024. But also, you do have to think about the possibility of another ride being opened up in Xfinity. Because you don't know what's going on. Riley Herbst and Cole Custer passes here. Cole Custer go back Cup Racing in 2024. Maybe he goes to the 00 car, or they open up a third car there. But nonetheless, when it comes to Shane Van Gisbergen, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I think he does have a chance to potentially go full-time Cup racing because of the fact that he has received multiple offers from Cup teams to go full-time. But if he is to go Xfinity and Truck Series racing to get oval experience, I think that's a really smart strategy on his part. I think Shane is one of the most talented drivers in the world, and I think he's one of the few drivers that could really adapt to ovals very, very quickly, like Scott McLaughlin did in IndyCar. I know it's a little different because IndyCar only has a few ovals, but Scott McLaughlin has adapted very quickly to that. I think that Shane Van Gisbergen would be like Scott McLaughlin and adapt to ovals very, very quickly and be pretty competitive. It's going to be exciting to see what happens. So when it comes to Shane Van Gisbergen, I want to see him full-time in NASCAR in 2024, and it sounds like that is going to happen where he's going to be running full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024. It's going to be exciting. I can't wait to see what happens wherever it goes. We'll see where it ends up happening. Now he's got to focus on trying to figure out who's going to be taking over his ride in the V8 Supercars, but nonetheless, it's really exciting to see that Shane Van Gisbergen is likely going to be racing full-time in NASCAR in 2024. He's one of the most talented drivers in the world, and I'm glad he's getting the shot and the opportunity to run full-time in NASCAR. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you know if I win a video, thus go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Link description below over that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Where do you think Shane Van Gisbergen is going to drive in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Eric Almirola potentially retiring and potentially Michael McDowell taking over? And your thoughts on Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin's comments from this past weekend at Richmond? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There'll be an NASCAR Xfinity Series race pick video up on the channel for the upcoming race at Michigan later today. Tomorrow there might be a silly season update on the channel as well at the beginning of August, and maybe another video if any major news breaks. Then on Wednesday there's going to be a NASCAR news video. We'll be talking about the short track package test that's currently going on as we speak. Then on Thursday will be race pick for the Cup Series race in Michigan and also the Asterix race to be from the race at Berlin. Then on Friday we'll have a NASCAR news video on the channel. Then Saturday we'll have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race review for Michigan, and then Sunday, of course, the NASCAR Cup Series race review for Michigan as well, followed by a lot of great and awesome content. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.